G'day team, Dr. Cois here. Welcome back to Overheard in the Emergency Room, the show where we take lessons the ER teaches us at 2 a.m. and turn them into a strategy for healthfulness that will give you less bad days and more good decades. Today, we're talking about stress, but not in the vague I'm busy type of way. We're going to talk about the autonomic nervous system, the part of you that decides whether you're in rest and digest or fight or flight, and the bigger question underneath it. How do we train our nervous system to downshift on purpose in a world that keeps trying to redline that system? Here's two quick ER stories to frame this episode. Case 1, the panic attack that looks like a heart attack. I had a 25-year-old guy who came in with shortness of breath and chest pain. He was at work. There'd been a heated exchange, his boss arguing with a customer, and the patient got caught in the blast radius. He's otherwise healthy, no meds, no smoking, no drugs, no heavy alcohol. Exam is normal, except he looks terrified. And then while I'm listening to his chest, he starts crying, like full, overwhelmed, can't catch my breath crying. We do the sensible ER thing, labs, ECG, chest x-ray, all reassuring. We give a small dose of lorazepam and the storm clears. He feels embarrassed. He keeps saying, I've never had this happen before. And that's the point. Panic isn't weakness. It's a nervous system doing a very normal job in a very modern setting. Case 2, the kid with belly pain that actually is fear. An 8-year-old boy comes in with abdominal pain. He's a healthy kid, normal exam, fully vaccinated, no trauma. But he's tearful in that I'm trying to be brave, but I'm not okay way. The backstory lands heavy. He was in a store with his dad. They're a Hispanic family living in the US in 2025 in an area with lots of immigration and custom enforcement activity. Another customer was yelling at the dad, threatening to call ICE purely based on how he looked. The kid heard it and his body lit up. Fear led to stomach pain, which led to tears and outrageous fear and fight or flight activation. We get him somewhere safe, give him a popsicle, some downtime, some toys. The pain resolved. We didn't really do anything. No labs, no medications, but his symptoms weren't nothing. That was his nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do, detect threat and protect the body. So that's the episode. What's happening to the body in these moments? We will look at what the long-term data suggests about chronic stress states and what the evidence says about tools like breathing, meditation, movement, and talk therapy. Let's build a simple model that's actually useful. Your brain is running two systems at once. System 1, thinking. This system works in milliseconds and answers the question, is this dangerous? And System 2, thinking. This is the slow system that works in seconds to minutes. Here, you have time to use your big functional brain to step back and assess the situation. I tell my patients that you have two brains. You have a primitive alligator brain, which in anatomical terms includes the brainstem, the midbrain, the pons, the amygdala, and everything but the cerebrum and cerebellum. I call it the alligator brain because it's responsible for automatically keeping you alive. It manages cardiopulmonary responses to our environment and activates our fight or flight response as we take in signals from the world around us, such as sights and sounds. This alligator's brain reacts regardless of whether we want it to or not. Then we have our big, beautiful brain, the cerebellum and the cerebrum. This is what makes humans human. And beyond storing memory and forming speech, it is responsible for executive function. Executive function enables us to understand the world around us and infer how we should interact with it. Here we can problem solve, plan for complex tasks, and make sense of what is truly dangerous to us and what is not. Then let us explore more about how we think. System 1 starts with your senses, especially vision. Your eyes and ears feed information into your alligator brain circuits that include the amygdala, which is basically an emotional smoke detector. If the amygdala thinks something is a threat, a shout, a conflict, a memory, a sensation in your chest, it can hit the alarm before your thinking brain even finishes the sentence. Think about how this makes evolutionary sense. You need only see a flash of a stripe when you're walking through the jungle, and then your body starts to prepare for fight or flight to defend yourself from that tiger that is lurking. But What use is this in the modern concrete jungle that we live in? Those useful cassettes in the brain that allow us to appropriately activate against threats have been replaced with sights and sounds like the face of our boss or of a song that reminds us of an ex-lover and activates our fight or flight response. The alarm recruits the sympathetic nervous system and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and suddenly you've got an internal pharmacy open for business. Adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol running wild, making your blood sugar, your heart rate, your blood pressure all spike. And that's why panic feels so physical. Chest tightness, shortness of breath, tingling, dizziness, gastrointestinal upset, shaking, and the "I'm going to die" certainty. Your body is preparing you to run away from a tiger. It just happens that your tiger is an argument at work, or the fear that your dad could be taken away, or a weird sensation in your chest that your brain interprets as danger. When you hear people talk about regulating your nervous system, I think that this is what they mean. I say I think they are referring to this because I see this phrase and I think that it's become a mishmash of buzzwords on social media. When I talk about regulating your nervous system, I mean switching from system 1 to system 2 thinking. I want you to be able to use your big, beautiful executive brain to do its work and triage the real threats and start to control your autonomic nervous system appropriately. Some are able to do this easily, without thinking, while others are not. And for many, likely everyone, this is a process that needs to be trained through practice with downshifting. We can't always control the trigger, but we can train the downshift. So what happens when the fight or flight response gets stuck as the default position? When the stress response is occasional and proportional, it's protective. When it's frequent, prolonged, or stuck on, sleep gets worse, blood pressure trends up, glucose regulation gets noisier, cravings get louder, mood disorders become more likely, and attention and memory suffer. Clinically, we see this spectrum constantly. Panic, generalized anxiety, depression, functional gastrointestinal disorders, tension headaches, chronic pain syndromes, and hypertension that just won't settle down. Stress isn't a moral failure. It's physiology plus context. And sometimes the context is genuinely unsafe, like that kid situation. The goal isn't to tell people to breathe their way out of injustice. The goal is to say your nervous system is plastic. It learns, and we give it inputs that make it more resilient. I want to acknowledge that this is very easily said and much more difficult to put into practice. I also want to acknowledge my own privilege here as a middle-aged, white, cisgender man living in 2026 and how my environment is much easier to manage than that of many in my community. My goal for you with this episode is to understand your body better and learn some strategies on how to really beef up your System 2 thinking so that your default response isn't unending System 1 thinking. This process requires training and practice. Something I always get upset about is when employers try to conduct a one-off yoga session and call it wellness. Being able to switch to System 2 thinking requires practice. It requires you to recognize what is happening, then take action to try to bring yourself out of it. Sometimes you can do this yourself, using tools like exercise, breathwork, or meditation. But your brain has to be in an environment which is conducive to action. If you're in an abusive relationship at work or at home, having trouble with drugs and alcohol, have a diet rich in ultra-processed food, saturated fats with a significant surplus of calories, or you're living in the US in 2026, this can be quite challenging. Let's discuss the evidence that underpins some of the strategies we will discuss today. They're a mix of cohort studies, randomized control trials, literature reviews, and systematic reviews that assess how participants responded to various relaxation, meditation, and breathwork techniques. Let's start by looking at a 7-minute breathing and meditation trial conducted in Chinese university students. So the population was 59 college students in China, and they used a quasi-experimental design. The intervention was a 7-minute daily practice where they did brief breathing and/or meditation micro practices. The students incorporated a 7-minute daily practice between their 50-minute classes. One of the weeks, the intervention was breathing exercises or a guided meditation for 7 minutes, and they performed pre and post questionnaires to assess how the practices improved stress, anxiety, serenity, and active emotion. For comparison, each participant used themselves as a control with an experimental arm where they didn't perform a relaxation practice, but still answered the questionnaires. So this was a small study, but it was very interesting to me, especially in demonstrating the power of taking time to meditate or perform breathwork in short bursts. The application of this type of practice is broad and can be used regularly, even in the workplace. I can just imagine the benefit some of my colleagues in the hospital could get from doing this regularly. Imagine you've just had a tough resuscitation or been yelled at by an upset family member of one of your patients. You're on your break, you take a minute, do some deep breathing exercises to bring back some serenity and decrease your anxiety. Even if you're feeling overwhelmed, even though saying, "I don't have time" is real, micro practices can still be worthwhile. Paper number 2, aerobic exercise and mindfulness meditation in high-stress students. This was a pilot study. University is a stressful time in people's lives. You're still learning who you are, navigating your future career, and potentially living away from home for the first time. Typically, these folks are already healthy at baseline, so this leaves us with limited confounding factors. This paper is a pilot feasibility study that looked at relaxation techniques and aerobic exercise compared with control on measures of stress, anxiety, and depression. Here's the highlights, starting out with the population. High stress, college-based young adults in a pilot design with randomized groups. Comparator arms were exercise versus meditation versus a combination of exercise and meditation and a control group. The outcome, stress reduction signals with a repeated questionnaire. Here they selected university students who had some degree of baseline stress as determined by a validated single item stress questionnaire. They then assigned them into 3 groups: control, mindful meditation, and exercise as well as mindful meditation. The treatment groups conducted 3 40-minute sessions per week and also kept a daily journal for a total of 4 weeks. The aerobic activity that performed was 40% of max heart rate on a cycle, ergometer, or treadmill for 20 minutes, and then additional exercise to achieve a total of 150 minutes per week. The mindful meditation group participated in the mindful-based stress reduction program, a well-researched mindfulness program that included audio they listened to during sessions and asynchronously. The groups had perceived stress, anxiety, and depression, measured using a 10-item perceived stress scale and a 21-item depression and anxiety scale. The research group found a significant improvement in anxiety, depression, and stress scores in the intervention groups. In those doing aerobic exercise and mindfulness, and in those just doing mindfulness. Now here's my careful scientist caveat. This was a very small pilot study, but the results are promising. And more research should be performed at a larger scale to ensure that results hold across a diverse population. The take home for me is that movement and mindfulness are not rivals, they're teammates. Now for paper number 3, slow breathing and progressive muscle relaxation. This was a randomized control trial that assessed the combined effect of slow breathing exercise and progressive muscle relaxation on blood pressure, heart rate, respiratory rate, and anxiety in patients diagnosed with essential hypertension. So the population was 64 adults, average 47 years old, with essential hypertension in a randomized control trial. They incorporated slow breathing exercise and/or progressive muscle relaxation, including combined approaches. The control was usual care for comparison. They measured blood pressure and stress-related measures and how they improved over the weeks of the study, and combining approaches may be most effective. What blew my mind reading this paper was the number for systolic blood pressure. The top number, when you get your blood pressure read, that number decreased anywhere from 4 to 7 points in people who were doing the intervention. What will I take home from this paper? Downshifting the nervous system can show up on the cuff, not just in your head. Paper number 4, diaphragmatic deep breathing in pre-hypertension and hypertension. This was a review. Hypertension is truly our silent killer. You rarely know you have it and the damage that it's doing to your blood vessels until something bad happens. Around 50% of strokes and heart attacks can be attributed to elevated blood pressure. What if we could use stress control techniques to support other interventions like reducing salt intake, alcohol use, and cigarette smoking, weight loss, regular exercise, and plant-based diets? This paper was a literature review that assessed studies that used diaphragmatic breathing techniques and how that affected blood pressure, heart rate, and anxiety reduction in patients with hypertension and prehypertension. So the population included adults with prehypertension and hypertension across the included studies. The interventions were numerous, and they included lots of different types of diaphragmatic deep breathing protocols. There were varied comparators depending on the study design. In terms of outcomes, the synthesis from the authors supports that diaphragmatic breathing techniques reduce blood pressure and heart rate and improved relaxation and anxiety outcomes. One particular study from this literature review followed 89 hypertensive adults, and after 6 months, the average systolic blood pressure decreased by 4 to 7 points. The protocol they used was music-guided abdominal breathing for 4 to 6 minutes at a time, with a goal of performing it daily. This is a meaningful improvement in blood pressure, but it didn't result in decreased antihypertensive medication use. What can you take away from this literature review? The simplest version of relaxation techniques, breathing slowly from the diaphragm, provides enough of a signal to suggest it can help with hypertension. Paper number 5, Relaxation Techniques in Cardiovascular Disease and Hypertension, a systematic review. So this was a systematic review of relaxation techniques in patients with cardiovascular disease, and it showed consistent improvements in measures of fatigue, stress, and anxiety. Again, here is the PICO summary of the paper. So the population was patients with cardiovascular disease and/or hypertension across the included studies. The intervention were relaxation techniques. Now, there were varied types across the studies. This paper included 5 broad categories of relaxation techniques. Progressive muscle relaxation, where participants were asked to perform successive tensing and loosening of particular muscle groups. The Benson relaxation technique, in which participants focus on a word or phrase with passive awareness to trigger the relaxation response. Diaphragmatic breathing, where you emphasize deep inhalations from the diaphragm instead of shallow breaths from the chest. Slow breathing practices, where you consciously slow your respiratory rate to promote calm and balance. And finally, heart rate variability biofeedback, where you teach people to manage their heart rate variability for improved regulation, focusing on synchronizing breathing and heart rate while using a biofeedback device. For a comparison, standard of care was typically used in the included trials. The outcomes showed that stress management and quality of life outcomes generally improved. Let's highlight one specific paper. A randomized control trial of 105 patients admitted to hospital with severe heart failure were randomized to a control, nature sounds, or Benson muscle relaxation group. The researchers found that participants in both the nature sounds and muscle relaxation groups had a statistically significant reduction in fatigue compared with the control group. And there was no difference between the 2 intervention groups. Now, this systematic review assessed many different stress outcomes, and even then, when hard outcomes vary, quality of life and stress outcomes often move in the same direction. Paper 6, Yoga Breathing and a Meditation Program for Burnout Among Physicians. This is one of my favorite papers that we're going to talk about today, because burnout is a significant issue among healthcare providers, and we should be seeking strategies to mitigate some of this stress. Yes, the system needs to change, which is a whole other topic, but there are things that we can do in our daily lives to improve our well-being while we wait for systemic shifts. This paper was a randomized clinical trial published in the Journal of the American Medical Association Network Open to assess the effect of yoga practice on stress reduction in physicians. So the population, they took 129 practicing physicians and assessed their stress, anxiety, and depression using a 42-item questionnaire. The trial lasted 2 months. The intervention group practiced Sudarshan Kriya Yoga for 30 minutes per day on their own after a period of instruction, and also participated in a 1-hour weekly group-based online follow-up practice. The control group reviewed and applied notes from stress management education training at their own leisure. They also had a weekly 1-hour group-based online follow-up session. Compared with the control group, the intervention group had significantly less stress, anxiety, and depression based on the 42-item survey after the training period. In addition, the intervention group had less insomnia and greater professional fulfillment. When it comes to burnout, this is incredibly important. Physicians don't mind doing the hard work, particularly if it gives them satisfaction. When you look into the details of this trial, you find that participants were required to practice the techniques. So it highlights the need to practice these techniques so that you can get better at it and reap the benefits. Now we get practical, because if this stays theoretical, it's just podcast decoration. I'm a firm believer that meditation, relaxation techniques, and breathwork are tier 1 interventions that everyone should try to incorporate into their daily lives. Let's describe 3 tools that you can and should use and practice. Tool 1, box breathing. This can be the default for busy people. This technique can be done anywhere, with limited time, and should be the basis of all relaxation or nervous system regulation techniques. This is what I teach in the emergency room when I have patients who are right in front of me. So make yourself comfortable. Close your eyes. Inhale through the nose for 3, 2, 3. Hold for 3, 2, 3. Exhale for 3, 2, 3. Hold for 3, 2, 3. And then repeat this 10 times, which will be about 2 minutes. You'll find that your mind will wander, and that's okay. That is what happens, and it's the point. But you're training yourself to think about your breath and take control of your alligator brain. Tell yourself while you are doing this, every long exhale tells my brain, we are not being chased. Every long inhale tells my brain, I am safe. If you feel worse during breath work, you might feel lightheaded, tingly, or more panicky, slow it down. Make the exhale gentle, or just start again. Consider grounding first. Plant your feet on the floor. Name 5 things that you see. If you feel like you're doing everything you can and still feel out of control, call a friend or a trusted loved one and let them know what's going on. Sometimes this just isn't enough and you need medical help. Call your emergency helpline or have someone take you to a healthcare professional. If you're feeling suicidal or like you are so out of control that you might hurt yourself, call 911 or 000 or have someone take you to seek help. Tool number 2, the downshift exhale. If box breathing is too structured for you, make it even simpler. Inhale for 2 seconds and then exhale for 4 seconds. Repeat this 5 to 10 times. Now, this is a nervous system hack, but it takes practice. In addition to this practice, start taking some time to notice how you're feeling. This episode isn't just about meditation, and you shouldn't think that you need to quit your job and head to a monastery in the mountains. Everything we are talking about is meditation and practice in teaching your brain to pay attention to what you want it to pay attention to. Meditation isn't no thoughts. It's noticing thoughts and returning attention to breath, sound, body sensations, or a phrase. One of the most influential books I've read in this space is Peace is Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh.
Sitting anywhere. When you need to slow down and come back to yourself. You do not need to rush home to your meditation cushion or to a meditation center in order to practice conscious breathing. You can breathe anywhere, just sitting on your chair at the office or sitting in your automobile. Even if you are at a shopping center filled with people or waiting in line at a bank, if you begin to feel depleted and need to return to yourself, you can practice conscious breathing and smiling just standing there.
In this book, he teaches about the driving meditation and the hug meditation. So every time you get in the car, you meditate. You take a moment before leaving your driveway and think about why you need to drive. Be thankful for being able to drive, and if you don't even need to drive, maybe you don't. The hug meditation is a phenomenal way to connect. You embrace a loved one and take 3 slow, coordinated breaths in and out. You feel their body against you and you feel their breath. You can think about your breathing or about why they are special to you. Now, I've been known to modify this for puppy meditation because hugging a dog is some very powerful relaxation, that's for sure. You're a good boy, lady. You're a good boy. If you want an opportunity to try more traditional meditation, here's your 2-minute starter. Start off by setting yourself a timer for 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The 15 seconds is to give you enough time to settle into a position. Sit down and get comfortable. Pick an anchor, feeling your breath at the nostrils or the feeling of your feet on the ground. When your brain travels and meanders, and it will, bring it back softly. Clear my thoughts. Come back to the downshift. Focus on your anchor. Do that for 2 minutes. That's it. It's just a practice, and you have to do it regularly in the same way you need to do a squat to get your legs strong. Micro practices matter because they lower the barrier to entry, and brief daily practices have been studied to be very effective at improving one's ability to regulate their nervous system. Let's circle back to our patient cases. For the 25-year-old, nervous system skills help. Sleep helps. Exercise helps. Meditation helps. And sometimes therapy helps most. Because the trigger isn't just physiology, it's the story, the threat appraisal, the patterns. For the 8-year-old, the intervention wasn't breathwork. It was safety, connection, a calm room, a kind adult, time. So yes, train your downshift. And also, respect that chronic stress can be a rational response to chronic threat. It's important to acknowledge that sometimes these skills are simply not enough and shouldn't be seen as the be-all and end-all. We are living in a time where having mental health issues is often seen as a moral failing, which I personally think is disgusting and a trope that is again perpetuated online by people who present a picture of perfection. The reality is that everyone is vulnerable to stress and the potential anxiety and mood disturbance that comes from it. Yes, we should be practicing these techniques, so we have a skill set to modulate our own nervous systems and our body's response to our environment. The reality for many is that they will need some extra help. This is where antidepressant medications and engaging with a professional, either a psychiatrist or a counselor, can be extremely helpful and necessary. If you're feeling great, I love that for you. Maybe reach out to a friend or family member to see how they are doing and ask if they might need help. But if you're feeling in distress, you need to reach out and ask for help. All right, team, here's the whole episode in one line. Stress is not just a feeling, it's a body state, and body states can be trained. Before you're in the middle of a storm, start absurdly small. 2 minutes of long exhales, 2 minutes of box breathing. Figure out a quick exercise snack you can do anywhere if you're feeling overwhelmed. Pick a window in your day where 7 minutes of practice can actually be repeated. Is it on your break, after your phone meeting in the morning, or right when you've dropped the kids off at school? Keep it simple and predictable so that when you're in crisis, you've done it before and it's effective. Go ahead and click on this link to access some meditation and relaxation tools that I've put together. Also, head to my website, drcois.com, for more free resources. Life is messy, life is unpredictable, and it can be overwhelming. Just remember, the goal isn't perfection. The goal is to have fewer bad days and more good decades. Before you go, if you like this episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss any of our content. Also, share this episode and head to my website, drcois.com, to read the companion blog post. Next up on Overheard in the Emergency Room, metabolic red flags, insulin, and glucose. The stuff that sneaks up quietly until it doesn't. I'm Dr. Cois, emergency physician. We'll see you next time.